My name is Cassandra Webb. I'm 31. 8 months ago, my parents called me 3 days before my sister's wedding and told me not to come. Not a text, a call. My father's voice, flat and rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the bathroom mirror. We think it's best if you sit this one out. I was standing in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, already holding the bridesmaid dress I'd altered twice at my own expense, already staring at the non-refundable train ticket to Sacramento on my counter. I set this one out, exactly like they asked. And then, 18 hours before the ceremony, the groom called me directly. What he said next, they didn't expect. But before I tell you that part, take a moment to like and subscribe if this story is speaking to something real for you. Drop your city and time zone in the comments. I want to know where you're finding this. Now let me take you all the way back to the beginning. Because this story didn't start 3 days before the wedding. It started the day my sister was born. I was 6 years old when Lily came home from the hospital. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, watching my mother carry her through the front door wrapped in a yellow blanket. My father had balloons. Everyone was cooing and leaning in. I stood at the top of the stairs and waited to be called down. Nobody called me. I eventually walked down on my own and tugged on my grandmother's sleeve. She patted my head without looking at me. "You're a big sister now, Cass. That's a very important job." Nobody told me what the job paid. Nobody mentioned the benefits were non-existent. Growing up in Sacramento, California, in the Webb household, meant understanding one thing very quickly. There were 2 kinds of children. Lily, who was soft and funny and cried beautifully and made every room warmer. And me, who was quiet and careful and asked too many questions and had adults that made adults uncomfortable. Lily got the kitchen table conversations. I got the pat on the head. Lily got the framed school photos. I got the "You're so capable, Cass. You don't need as much." By the time I was 14, I had internalized that needing things was a character flaw. By 22, I had turned it into a career. I became an occupational therapist. I spent my professional life helping people regain function, relearn movement, rebuild themselves after they'd been broken. Turns out, I had a talent for it. My personal theory is that I'd been practicing on myself for years. I moved to Portland at 24 for a residency position. My mother cried when I told her, but not the good kind of crying. The kind that says, "How could you do this to us?" My father said, "Well, Portland's not that far. It's 12 hours by car and 2 by plane, and they visited me exactly once in 7 years. Lily came twice, both times because her then boyfriend, later fiancé, had a work conference nearby, and she tagged along. We had dinners that were pleasant on the surface and slightly wrong underneath, the way a picture frame hangs slightly crooked on a wall, and you keep adjusting it but it never quite sits right. Her fiancé's name was Derek Huang. He was 29, a structural engineer, the kind of man who apologizes when he bumps into furniture. The first time I met him properly was at a family dinner in Sacramento, 2 Christmases before the wedding. He shook my hand and said, "You're the sister in Portland. Lily talks about you all the time." I filed that away without comment. Lily had never once mentioned him to me before the engagement. We were living parallel stories that were supposed to be the same story. When the engagement was announced in February, my mother called me. Not to ask if I'd be a bridesmaid, to tell me I would be, like it had already been decided. "Of course you're in the wedding party," she said briskly. "You're the sister. Lily needs you there." I said I'd be honored. I meant it. I started looking at dresses the same evening. This is the part I want you to hold on to. I was excited, genuinely, uncomplicatedly, embarrassingly excited. I called my best friend Dana and talked about it for 45 minutes. I had already forgotten every reason why I should have been cautious. When your family reaches toward you, you don't stop to check if they've got a grip. You just reach back. The first sign was the group chat. My mother created a WhatsApp group called Lily's Big Day. She added my Aunt Carol, my cousin Freya, Lily's 3 college friends, and herself. She did not add me. I found out about it when Aunt Carol accidentally sent a voice message to the wrong thread. I could hear my mother's voice in the background talking about centerpiece heights and font choices for the menu cards. I texted Lily directly. "Hey, am I in the group chat?" She responded 4 hours later. "Oh, Mom manages it. She's just kind of taken over, lol. You're not missing much." That was the whole response. I made a note of it. I moved on. This is what I always did. I made a note. I filed the note somewhere quiet in the back of my chest, and I kept going. The dress situation came in March. My mother emailed me a photo of a dusty rose gown and said, "This is what we've chosen." It was floor length, fitted, backless. I am 5'9" and broad-shouldered, and I'd been a competitive swimmer in college. My body is strong and built like a swimmer's body. I wrote back and said it was beautiful, but asked if there were other options. Maybe something with a little structure in the back, since I'd need alterations. My mother replied, "That's the dress, Cass. Lily loves it. We can't change it for one person." I ordered the dress. I paid $280 for it. I paid the tailor in Portland $85 to alter it. I sent a photo to my mother when it was finished. She replied with a thumbs up emoji. 1 thumb up. The months between the engagement and the wedding were full of small moments like that, each one individually dismissible. Together, they formed a pattern I kept refusing to name. I wasn't included in the venue tour. I wasn't consulted on the ceremony music. I wasn't given a role at the engagement party, just invited as a guest, seated at a table with people I didn't know, and introduced by my mother to 3 different people as our family friend from Portland. Not her daughter, not the sister of the bride, the family friend from Portland. I told myself my mother was overwhelmed. The wedding had 200 guests. There was a lot to coordinate. I was far away and harder to include. I was being too sensitive. This is the story I told myself for 7 months. I was a very good storyteller. Then came the call. Wednesday, 3 days before the wedding. October. The Portland rain doing what Portland rain does in October, which is everything. My phone rang at 7:14 p.m. My father, Gerald Webb, 63, retired contractor, a man of very few words and even fewer confrontations. Him calling me was unusual enough that I actually checked the screen twice before answering. Cass. Hi, Dad. There's something we need to tell you. His voice had a quality I recognized, the voice of a man who had been given a script. We've been thinking about the wedding. Lily and your mother and I had a conversation, and we feel it would be better if you didn't come. I stood very still in my kitchen. The rain was loud against the window. Excuse me? It's nothing personal. It's just that the dynamics, well, things get complicated when you're around, Cass. You know that. The tension. It's Lily's day and we don't want anything to disrupt it. Complicated, I said. What does that mean exactly? He paused. Your mother will explain it better. Then he said, take care of yourself, and hung up. My mother called 11 minutes later. I picked up and didn't say anything. She filled the silence. Cass, this is hard to say, but you know how you can be. You're very intense. You have opinions. And Derek's family is very traditional. And we just don't want any scenes, any tension, anything that takes the focus off Lily. It wouldn't be fair to her. Mom, I said, I'm a bridesmaid. I have the dress. I have a train ticket. I know, she said. We'll reimburse you for the ticket. For the dress too, if you want. This is really for the best. What have I done? I said. What have I done that made you think I would cause a scene at my sister's wedding? A pause. It's not about what you've done. It's about who you are, Cass. You make people uncomfortable without meaning to. Derek's mother especially. She's very particular. What do you mean, who I am? But she had already shifted to logistics. We'll tell people you were sick. Nobody needs to know. Nobody needs to know. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not in a dramatic way. My legs just quietly stopped holding me up. I called Lily 3 times that night. The first 2 went to voicemail. The third, she answered and immediately said, Mom talked to you? I said, your father talked to me first, actually. Silence. Lily, did you ask them to do this? A long pause. The kind of pause that answers the question. Derek's mom was worried, she finally said. She had questions about you, about your politics and your lifestyle, and some things she'd seen on your Instagram. And I just thought, it's one day. I can't have drama on my wedding day. I breathed. Lily, what questions? What things? Cass, please, I just need this to be perfect. Please understand. What lifestyle, Lily? Are you talking about the fact that I'm gay? The word landed like something dropped from a height. I had come out to my family 4 years earlier. My parents had been quiet about it, in the specific way that means not quiet at all. Lily had said, "I love you. Of course I love you. But please don't make it a whole thing." I had tried to honor that request for 4 years. Apparently, I had not succeeded. I don't know what Derek's mother thinks she saw on Instagram, Lily said quietly. But they're paying for a large part of the wedding, and they have opinions. And I can't fight everyone's battles, Cass. I can't. You're not fighting my battle, I said. I'm your sister. This is my battle. She said, I'm sorry. And she hung up. I put my phone face down on the counter. I looked at the train ticket. Non-refundable. $112. Portland to Sacramento. Departing Friday, 10:15 a.m. I looked at the bridesmaid dress hanging on the back of the door. The alterations had taken 3 separate fittings. The tailor, an older woman named Rosa who worked out of a studio on Burnside, had pinned the back seam herself and said, "You have good posture. Stand up straight at the wedding." I had tipped her $20 on top of the $85 and told her I would. I had meant it. I stood in my kitchen and thought about calling Rosa and telling her not to bother. Then I thought about calling my mother back. Then I thought about every other time I had called back, had explained myself, had softened the edges of my own hurt to make it more palatable to the people who created it. I thought about the 3 photos of Lily on my parents' mantle and the 0 of me. I thought about being introduced as a family friend from Portland. I thought about a thumbs up emoji and 7 months of group chats I wasn't in. I thought about the fact that my sister had known, had maybe helped decide, and her apology had lasted exactly 3 seconds before the line went dead. Then I thought about Dana saying, "Don't you dare go." I called her back. She picked up immediately. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. The way she's quiet when she's organizing her thoughts before she says something true. She said, "Cass, you have spent 31 years proving yourself to people who keep changing the standards. You can stop now." I said, "What do I do with the ticket?" She said, "You get a refund if you can. If you can't, you put it in a drawer, and you don't open that drawer for 6 months. I said, "And the dress?" She said, "Push it to the back of the closet. You'll know what to do with it later." She was right, as she usually was. I pushed the dress to the back of the closet. I went to bed. I did not sleep well, but I slept. That was something. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. The dress was hanging on the back of my bedroom door in its dry cleaning bag. The train ticket was on my counter. My overnight bag was already half packed because I was that person. I pack early. I show up prepared. I give 100% to the people I love, even when the math suggests I shouldn't. I called Dana. She answered on the first ring, the way she always does, because she is the kind of friend who answers on the first ring. And I have never once taken that for granted. I told her everything. She said 4 words before I even finished. Don't you dare go. And then she let me cry for 20 minutes without once telling me to look on the bright side. Here's what I want to ask you before I continue. Has someone ever excluded you not because of what you did, but because of who you are? Has anyone ever asked you to be less yourself, to make a room more comfortable? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading all of them. And if this is hitting close to something real for you, please subscribe. Now back to the story. I did not go to the wedding. I spent that Friday and Saturday in Portland, methodically doing the things you do when your chest has a small, clean hole in it that you refuse to acknowledge. I went to the farmer's market. I made soup. I reorganized a bookshelf. I put the dress back in its bag and pushed it to the back of the closet. I turned my phone over so I wouldn't watch for messages that weren't coming. On Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, I went for a 6-mile run. It was cold and clear, the kind of October morning that feels like a gift. And I ran until I couldn't hear my own thoughts anymore. When I got back, I showered, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the mug. My phone was face down on the table. I watched it without touching it for approximately 4 minutes. Then it rang. The number was a 916 area code, Sacramento, but not a number I recognized. I almost didn't pick up. Hello? Hey, this is Derek. There was a pause. Derek Huang, your sister's fiancé. I said, I know who you are, Derek. Good, he said, because I need to talk to you about something, and I'm going to need you to hear me out before you respond. I said, okay. He took a breath. I want you to know first that I did not know any of this was happening. I found out yesterday. Found out what? I asked. Found out that Lily's parents told you not to come. Found out about the conversation with my mother, which, by the way, I did not authorize, and my mother and I have had several words about it this morning. His voice was controlled but tight, the voice of a man who was deeply angry and deeply trying not to show it. I don't know what my mother said to your parents, he continued. I don't know exactly what was communicated about you, and I don't know why your parents agreed to any of this. But I do know that you are Lily's sister, her only sister. And I know you've been excluded from your own family's plans for months. And I know that's not okay. I stared at the wall. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. He kept going. I've been trying to get Lily to call you. She's not in a place to right now. She's overwhelmed. And she made some choices I don't agree with. And she knows that. But here's why I'm calling, Cassandra. He used my full name. Nobody uses my full name. The ceremony starts at 4. We're doing a first look at 2. And I'd like you to be in it. I want Lily to see you before she walks down the aisle. I want you standing up there with her." He paused. "I know I don't have the right to ask you this. You've been treated badly, and you'd be completely justified in telling me to go to hell. But I'm asking anyway, because I love your sister, and she loves you, even when she's terrible at showing it, and I don't want her to spend the rest of her life having regret as the background of her wedding photos." Silence. I could hear noise behind him, the controlled chaos of a wedding venue morning. I said, "Derek?" He said, "Yeah." "Where did Lily think you were right now?" He exhaled. "Getting ready in our suite. She thinks I'm taking a walk to clear my head." I swallowed. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because," he said, and he sounded very tired and very young all at once. "My mother was wrong. Your parents were wrong. And sometimes, when everyone around you is wrong, somebody has to be right." I sat with that for a moment. The coffee had gone cold in my mug. I looked at the train ticket on my counter. I looked at the clock on my microwave. It was 8:47 a.m. The train left at 10:15. I said, "Tell me the venue address." I packed in 12 minutes. I threw the dress in a bag still in its dry cleaning bag. I didn't stop to think about whether this was a good idea. I knew it wasn't a safe idea. Safe and good are not the same thing, and I have made a career out of knowing the difference. I caught the train by 4 minutes. I sat in the window seat and watched the Oregon landscape flatten into California, and I rehearsed every version of what might happen when I walked into that room. In none of my versions did it go smoothly. Derek met me in the venue parking lot. Edgewater Estate, a vineyard event space in the hills outside Sacramento. The kind of place with a long gravel driveway and cypress trees and a stone fountain that announces you have arrived somewhere people take seriously. He was standing by the fountain in his dress shirt, not yet in his jacket, hands in his pockets. He looked, honestly, like a man who had not slept and had possibly been crying, and was trying to look like neither was true. He shook my hand. Then he hugged me, briefly. The hug of a stranger who has decided you're worth the risk. "Thank you for coming," he said. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "About 40 minutes before the coordinator starts looking for me." He looked at my bag. "You brought the dress?" "Occupational therapist," I said. "We plan for functional outcomes." He almost smiled. "Come on." He took me in through a side entrance and up a back staircase to a suite on the second floor. He knocked twice, 3 times, then pushed the door open. Lily was sitting at a vanity in a white robe, her hair already done, pins still in from the stylist. She saw me in the mirror before she turned around. Her face went through 5 things in about 2 seconds. Shock. Then what I can only describe as pure relief. The involuntary kind that arrives before the brain catches up. Then guilt. Then something careful and complicated that I think was fear. Then her eyes filled up, and she stood up from the chair, and she said, "Cass." I stood in the doorway with my dress bag over my shoulder and looked at my little sister on her wedding day. She was 27 years old and her hair was perfect, and she had made some decisions in the last 72 hours that were going to take us both years to untangle. I said, "You look beautiful." She started crying before I finished the sentence. Derek closed the door behind him and left us to it. Smart man. I went in and put the bag down, and Lily grabbed me and hugged me hard. The kind of hug that's also an apology. The whole body version, where the words haven't been found yet, but the intention is there, like a current running through both of you. We held on for a long time without saying anything. Then she pulled back and looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. "Why did you let them do it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I was scared," she said. "Of what?" "I've been scared for months," she said. "Of Derek's mom. Of making it complicated. Of you coming and everyone seeing that we don't know how to be a family, and it blowing up in the middle of the ceremony. Of making it real." I said, "Lily, look at me." She looked. You not inviting me didn't make it less real. It just meant I wasn't there while the real thing happened. She closed her eyes. "I know," she said. "I know." She sat back down at the vanity, and I sat on the edge of the bed across from her, and we talked for 32 minutes, not about the wedding, not about the ceremony, or the seating chart, or the Huangs. We talked about the two of us. We talked about the kitchen table and the bathroom mirror scripts, and the fact that she had watched me be edged out of our family for 25 years, and had sometimes moved aside to let it happen, because she didn't know how to stop it without losing something herself. She said, "I kept thinking someone else would fix it." I said, "I know. I did that too." She said, "I don't want Derek's family to be like ours. That's why I was so scared. I want to be better than this." I said, "That starts today." She nodded. Then she said, "Will you stand up there with me?" And I said, "I already came all this way in a crumpled dress with bad hair and no makeup. We're not stopping now." I got dressed in the bathroom. The dress still fit, even slightly better than it had at the tailor's, which felt like a small architectural miracle. I found a makeup pouch in Lily's bag and did the minimum necessary. I looked objectively like someone who had been on a train for 2 hours and cried in the parking lot. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. Close enough. The coordinator knocked at 2 minutes to 2. She opened the door, saw me standing next to Lily, and did not break stride. She was a professional. If she had questions, she buried them in the name of the timeline. She said, "Ladies, we're doing the first look in 4 minutes. You look wonderful." And she moved on. Derek was waiting by the vineyard gate. When he saw Lily come around the corner, his face did the thing faces do when the person you love is dressed for the biggest moment of their shared life. He put his hand over his mouth. He looked at her, and then he looked at me, and he nodded once, small, deliberate. The photographer was positioned, and I stepped back out of frame. But as I stepped back, Lily reached out and grabbed my hand. "Stay," she said. "Please." "So I'm in the photos. Not planned, not coordinated, not wearing the right shoes for the terrain. I'm in the photos anyway. Standing next to my sister on her wedding day, with flat hair and borrowed mascara, and it is the most real I have ever looked in a photograph in my life." The ceremony was at 4. Derek had already spoken to his mother before I arrived. I don't know exactly what he said. Ruth Huang, 61, retired hospital administrator, a woman built for institutional authority, gave me exactly one look when I walked into the ceremony space as part of the wedding party. It was a long look, measured and recalibrating. She nodded very slightly. I nodded back. We were both adults. We both understood that something was being negotiated in that nod, without either of us having to say a word. My parents saw me when I took my place at the front of the aisle. I watched their faces from across the room. My father went very still. My mother's mouth opened and then closed. Neither of them came over. Neither of them said anything during the ceremony. They sat in their seats like two people who had arrived at an event and discovered the agenda had changed. Lily walked down the aisle to a string quartet playing something I didn't recognize, something modern and sweet. When she reached the front and stood across from Derek, she looked at me once, and I smiled at her, and she squared her shoulders and turned toward her husband, and I thought, this is the strongest she's ever looked. Afterward, at the reception, Derek found me at the edge of the room by the bar. He handed me a glass of wine and said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here." I said, "For what it's worth, so is she." He said, "She's going to need help, getting better at this, being a real sister to you." I said, "I know." He said, "I'll keep working on it from my end." I believed him. He had already earned that. My parents approached me during the cocktail hour, together, which was unusual. Typically, when there is a difficult conversation, my father sends my mother and then retreats to a corner with a drink. They came to me side by side. My father spoke first. He said, "We didn't know you were coming." I said, "I know." He said, "How did you?" I said, "Derek called me." My mother's jaw tightened. She said, "You shouldn't have come, Cass. This wasn't your place." I said, "I'm her sister, Mom. I've always been her sister. That doesn't stop being true just because it's inconvenient." She said, "We were protecting Lily." "From what?" I asked. "From the Huangs," she said. "From complications. From having to explain things." I looked at her. "I want you to hear me say this clearly," I said. "I'm not a complication. I'm your daughter. I'm a person, and I have spent 31 years making myself smaller to fit into a frame that was never built for me. I'm done doing that." My mother looked like she was going to argue. My father put his hand briefly on her arm, not stopping her exactly, more like setting a pause. Then he said, very quietly, "She's right, Diane." She looked at him. He didn't look back. He just picked up his drink and walked toward the venue doors. She stood there for a moment, then followed him. I stood there with my wine glass and watched them go. I expected to feel a lot of things. I mostly felt very tired. Not broken, not victorious, just tired. The way you feel at the end of something that should have ended years ago. I stayed through dinner. I danced with Lily for 2 songs when the floor opened up. Derek's cousins were excellent dancers, and I ended up in a group doing something that required no coordination at all, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. By 9 o'clock, the wine was good and the fairy lights were doing their work, and there were moments where I forgot, briefly, that the morning had happened. Those moments felt like grace. Ruth Huang found me near the dessert table at 9:30. She said, "You are Cassandra." I said, "Yes." She said, "I understand I owe you an apology." I looked at her. She was not a woman who used that phrase carelessly. She said, "I asked questions about you that I had no right to ask. I made judgments that were not mine to make. Derek has explained this to me quite thoroughly. I will add that he has his father's way of being thorough, which is to say, entirely, and without mercy." I almost smiled. She said, "I want you to know that as far as I'm concerned, you are part of this family now, which means Derek and I will both require your presence at future events." She extended her hand. I shook it. She held it a moment longer than necessary. "Good," she said. "Now tell me about your work." "I'm a hospital board member in Sacramento, and occupational therapy is chronically underfunded, and I want to understand why." We talked for 45 minutes. She was sharp and direct, and argued 3 of my points before conceding them. It was the most professionally stimulating conversation I had had in months. When she left to find her husband, she touched my shoulder once, lightly, like a period at the end of a sentence. I drove back to my parents' house that night, not because I had forgiven them, not because anything was resolved. I drove back because I had left some things there years ago. A box of books, a piece of my grandmother's jewelry, a part of my history I kept meaning to retrieve and kept putting off. And because I thought, if I'm going to draw a line, I should draw it in person. My father was in the kitchen when I came in. It was past midnight. He was at the table with a glass of water, not reading, not doing anything, just sitting, like he'd been waiting. He looked up when I came in and said nothing. I sat down across from him. The kitchen was exactly as I remembered it. The same yellow curtains, the same coffee maker, the same small crack in the tile by the back door that had been there since I was 9. I said, "Dad, I need to know something." He looked at me. "Did you ever want me to be different?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "I don't think so. I think I just wanted it to be easier." "Easier for who?" I asked. He thought about it. For everyone, he said. For me, if I'm being honest. I don't like conflict, Cass. I never have. You've always asked for things no one knew how to give. I said, I asked to be included. He said, I know. That sounds simple, and it wasn't. That's a failure, Cass. I know that. He looked at the table. I'm not going to tell you I'll be different. I don't know if I can be at this point. But I'm not going to sit next to your mother next time she tries to make you disappear. I can promise that. It wasn't everything. It was something. I went to get my box and my grandmother's ring. My mother was in bed. I did not wake her. That conversation was for another day, or maybe not a day at all. Some things need to be said. Some things need to be left as they are, sealed and labeled, taken out and looked at occasionally without being opened. 6 months have passed since the wedding at Edgewater Estate. Lily and Derek are living in Sacramento, in a house with a back porch she sends me photos of. She's started therapy, which she mentions casually in texts the way you mention a new coffee shop, matter-of-factly, like it's just something she does now. We talk on the phone every other Sunday. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's awkward, and sometimes there is a long pause where we're both sitting with the weight of everything we're still learning to say. That's okay. I've learned that connection doesn't require perfect fluency. It just requires 2 people willing to keep trying. Derek texts me occasionally. News articles about occupational therapy funding that he knows will annoy me. Occasionally, a photo of Lily doing something ridiculous in their kitchen. He signed the last one, your brother-in-law, which I didn't expect, and which made me stand in the middle of my office for about 30 seconds, doing nothing. My mother called me in January, 4 months after the wedding. Not to apologize exactly, but to talk. She called it an explanation. I called it an apology she hadn't found the right word for yet. I let her talk for a long time without interrupting. She said she'd been afraid. She said the Huangs were important to the wedding, and she didn't know how to manage everyone's opinions, and she'd made a decision she thought was protecting Lily. She said, I know I hurt you. I said, I know you know. There was a long pause. She said, I want to do better. I said, so do I. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a beginning. We're still in it. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, told me after the wedding that Derek's speech at the reception had included a line about chosen family and what it means to grow a new one, and how some of the most important people in your life arrive without a blueprint, and you have to build the room yourself while they're standing in it. She said Lily cried. She said my mother left the table briefly. She said Ruth Huang held her husband's hand the whole time. I started running longer distances, 7 miles on Sunday mornings, sometimes 8. There's something about the distance that resets things in me that nothing else can reach. On the long stretches, I think about the kitchen floor in Portland, the train I almost didn't catch. The parking lot where I sat in a rental car and argued with myself about whether I deserved to be there. I think about Derek standing by a stone fountain with his hands in his pockets, choosing to be right when everyone around him was wrong. I think about my sister's face in the mirror when she saw me and the way her whole body let go of something it had been holding for months. These are not small things. These are the things that change the shape of a life. I still have the dress, the dusty rose one, altered twice, that I wore to a wedding I almost didn't attend, in a family I almost gave up on. It still has a small grass stain on the hem from where I walked across the vineyard in the wrong shoes. I haven't cleaned it. I'm not entirely sure why. I think I am keeping it as evidence, not of what happened, but of what I did with it. I could have stayed in Portland with my soup and my bookshelf and my logical, self-protective absence. I could have let Derek's call go to voicemail. I could have decided the door that was closed to me was the final answer. But I've learned something in 31 years that my patients know, and that I sometimes forget when it applies to myself. Recovery is not the absence of damage, it's the decision to function anyway, to reach despite the pain, to stabilize what you can, to build the strength back, slowly and imperfectly, and on your own terms. My family is not fixed. My relationship with my mother is a work in progress that may never be finished. My father is doing his quiet, limited best. Lily is learning a new language, the language of being someone's sister for real. And she's working hard at it, even when it's clumsy. And I am doing the same, learning to receive, to stay in the room, to let the people who choose me actually hold on. I didn't lose my place at the table that October. I just found out it had been the wrong table all along. The right one is being built, slowly, one Sunday phone call at a time, by two sisters who finally stopped letting other people decide what they were to each other. I want to ask you something before we finish. Have you ever been the one who had to show up for someone who hadn't shown up for you? Did you do it? Was it worth it? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. If this story reached something real in you, please like and subscribe. I share stories like this every week about family and silence, and the people who choose to be right when everyone around them isn't. There's another one in the description I think you'll connect with. I'll see you in the next one.